Good day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. Today, I would like to address you in regards to a new initiative that I'm taking on for myself. Right now, I have found myself in a position of inability to produce the outcomes that are necessary in order for me to fulfill what is my purpose in achieving the advancement of the platform of eudaimonia, to be the offering that I am bringing to America and, in fact, the world, as the legitimacy by which I can win over the consensus of the American people and the good people of the world, so that I can become President of the United States. This is a lofty goal, and it's something that I cannot do alone. And I don't want to take this approach like it has been done before by other presidential candidates. To me, I think that the shift in the changes of politics and elections in particular, not just in America, but all across the world in different countries, has really shown this dire need for there to be some sort of shift in how things work. The thing that I dislike the most about it is that most elections are about popularity contests rather than policy. And the fact that someone could win over enough votes in order to assume the role of presidency based off of the fact that they had deep character flaws. They were found guilty of felony counts and found liable for assault, and that during their first presidency, they were the direct cause of a tremendous loss of life and economic viability of our country by mismanagement of a pandemic for just lack of care, and was the sole source of the instigation of an insurrection on our nation. And to me, watching the 2024 election was disturbing and upsetting, to say the least, especially when they came out with the concept of the Project 2025 guidebook as to what a Republican president would do as their policy platform if they won in the 2024 election and became president in 2025. And we all were told that this was what was going to happen, and that the Republican candidate was going to advance this, though their campaign personnel denied and rejected and tried to push themselves away from it. But now that the election is over and the Republican candidate won, we see every day the fulfillment of basically verbatim everything that was in the Project 2025 guidebook. So to me, it just says that there's a huge disconnect between what the people are thinking they're going to get out of electing someone and the truth of things, how they actually pan out. Reality does not match what the rhetoric that happens on the campaign trail. And so to me, it was like, I have always kind of like felt that the best way to approach a candidacy would be to present a viable, platform with policy proposals and stand by that with confidence. Let the American people know this is what my intent is. This is what I'm going to do. and then to build out prototypes of sorts in various areas throughout the country, to be able to kind of show the viability of what sort of outcomes that these policy proposals will be able to bring about. And so you can see an effective, workable, solution to the problems that you have, that the policy that the candidate is saying they're going to initiate will be able to solve for. And so this prototype proves out the viability of the platform and the policy proposals. And then it actually does the good work of improving people's lives. So the great benefit is that even if a candidate doesn't win out in an election, those benefits of intentional improvement of the lives of everyday Americans, and the cultivation of prosperity in communities, and the curation of solutions to problems that have been long-standing and systemic and that need real-world solutions, those benefits would still uphold and can be carried out and continued by the individuals in those community who these prototypes would be, given to as, this is the offering that we're giving to you. This is an opportunity. This is a chance. This is something that's going to make a difference. And to me, it just seems like if politics was about doing that, think of how much change could come about, positive change for the better, then would just be campaigns accumulating massive amounts of money from who knows, and then these big donors expecting to have some sort of return on investment of what am I going to get out of this if I'm going to fund this campaign and whatnot. And though small dollars, every dollar counts and every dollar adds up, so even small donations are helpful to a campaign. They don't equate to the candidate actually following through on helping the individuals that have made campaign contributions. It's usually those who invest the most amount of money are the ones that get to dictate how the policy is going to play out once the person is in the presidency. They're beholden to them, and that's very much what we're seeing and experiencing right now in the current administration. But there's a little bit of a twist too in where policy is being so designed that the government is implanting itself in every facet of our lives. Companies have to ask permission to operate as they choose, and that if they operate under standards that this administration doesn't feel is in alignment with their intentions, that your company could lose its chance to conduct business. And the fact of that is that what this administration is requesting companies do and adhere to is not actually something that is beneficial for anyone except for this ideological sense of white superiority. And so and then a meritocracy that's not even based off of what you do, but really in this case, like what money you have, what position you hold, what role do you play in this group of people that are self-reinforcing prosperity for themselves at the disadvantage of many other people. And so the great advances that we've made through DEI, which is what this I'm particularly talking about here, the administration at present is trying to break up the concept of DEI in companies without even looking at the specifics of it. They just type in some keywords and say, If you use any of these words, even though they might not necessarily have anything to do with the context that they think it does, it's just a hot topic, keyword, they're, isolated out and pointed out and then sent threatening letters to say, change your business model, change your business practices, or, we're going to sue you out of oblivion, and then you won't be able to operate anymore. And what they're asking isn't reasonable. It's not anything that's going to improve the circumstances of the culture at those companies. It's actually preventing the companies from being able to justify to their shareholders, how they orient their, money accumulation and how they distribute it in terms of doing certain campaigns that help to bring in a certain type of collective community that makes sure that they're fostering a reflection of what our nation's supposed to be, is this, multicultural, multi-identity, multiracial, pluralistic democracy. And our economy is a great driver of our nation, and one of the things that has made democracy possible. And so when a company is being denied its free market capacity and its capitalistic capacity to operate in such a way that helps to solve for these systemic issues, to help to kind of redeem the time, which is the closest thing that we currently have to, reparations for the terrible tragedies of slavery, the oppression of people. And instead of respecting that, knowing that it's an imperfect system, surely, and instead of saying there's things about it that we want to change because we really do want to base it off of merit, which I'm fine with. I like if it's based off of merit, which is which is based off of who you are and how you show up and what you contribute. What you do is how you make a living, but who you are is how you make a life. And it should be respecting of that and respecting of the individual. And I don't believe that the meritocracy that they're trying to create has anything to do with actual merit. Things that are merciless, moralist, manipulative, mean, and even in a lot of cases, monetary, without the, embedded purpose of the money itself being to achieve good outcomes. In this case, how especially this current administration and this current POTUS 47, money is a manipulative tool for exploitation, and it's not, used for good purposes. It's a way to amass power so that you can control other people. And it's, of course, that is not meritorious. There's nothing of merit in that. And so the concept of them trying to create a meritorious system by getting rid of DEI because they think it should be based off of, they try to claim they're trying to uphold what, Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Reverend, would say of, to not be judged by the color of your skin, but the content of your character. But let's just look at the fact that the content of the character of the current president of the United States is one of demoralization and indignification and disrespect and self-indulgence and selfishness. And the only people that he cares about are those people that can do things for him. And as in his role of president, both times, the first time he was president and now being elected again, he's not doing things for the American people. He's doing things to the American people, and even more so now. And he's disregarding our institutions long-standing. He is making people question the validity of our institutions, while at the same time, creating a culture of suspicion of government while at the same time concentrating power of government and imposing the government more and more on the personal lives of individuals and over the controls of companies and over, the cultural narratives that we have, erasing and rewriting history, all of these things, getting to the point where they're justifying using excessive force in the United States against the American people, which, God bless our soldiers for the fact of what sort of permanent, lasting, irrevocable damage is being done to these brave and courageous men and women that are forced in their commitment of duty and sacrifice and honor to direct their skills and their talents and their capacities and their good work towards the enforcement of outrageous policies and going after and targeting their fellow Americans. And it's not like we have, a massive insurrection that's happening, It's not like we're having a civil war or something. These people during peaceful times, for reasons of the misinterpretations of, the dynamics of the social and domestic order within cities across the nation, that this administration under POTUS 47 has decided that they, by their terms and conditions, their ideas, their perspective, perception, and proposition is that they believe they have every justification to direct military forces to go after American citizens. And this is wrong. And you have to think about what sort of, psychological damage that's going to do to our soldiers that, have been trained to use force in order to protect the Constitution against enemies both foreign and domestic. And that the enemies that the President of the United States is creating, he's creating these enemies out of his sensibilities, what he thinks, what his jurisprudence is, what his interpretation of the law is. He's making enemies out of everyday Americans and going after them with the full force of his capacity. And most of these people that are getting caught up in this are not people that are like, a danger or a threat to society, but they do minor infractions, and it's not just, people just doing regular everyday things, walking down the street and seeing military patrol walking around everywhere. This is fear and intimidation, and it changes people's behaviors. And while it might, in some capacity, thwart some crimes, what it's doing is instilling fear in people. It's making people change their attitudes and their behaviors, and their lives are being disrupted and disturbed. And so you have a POTUS that's saying that for the few people that he's not able to control to prevent them from, committing crime, and instead of doing, a thoughtful and concerted effort to improve the law enforcement system, he just puts everything on lockdown and has military trooping down the streets, scaring people and creating a military state right before our eyes. And I don't know how our brave soldiers are reconciling this in their heads and in their hearts. Because they're obligated to a duty to fulfill the orders that are brought from, the commander-in-chief, who obviously hasn't thought this through. He just sees an opportunity to create a control mechanism by using the forces that are at his disposal to direct them towards ends of, fear and intimidation, in order to, fix a problem that he sees that he doesn't want to see anymore. He wants the mess to go away. And if, the military are there trumping on the streets, that he's not going to have to see it anymore. That's what he calls, order. And mind you, the homeless people, which were a big part of his, reactionary decision making to use this force, is part of his justification. He doesn't see those as people. He sees them as obstacles. He sees them as impositions. He sees them as these things that have to be dealt with. And he has no legitimate plans to improve the situation of their lives. He's criminalizing them and demonizing them and isolating them even further from any sort of resolution for them to get out of that terrible negative spiral into a better system of true, integration and assimilation back into society, regardless of the reasoning as to how they got there. Because those are varied. And no cookie cutter, solution is going to solve for the many different, aspects of it, if that cookie cutter solution is based off of a disregard of the fact that these are even humans or people that have stories that must be considered, lives that must be respected, a personal dominion that cannot be denied and shouldn't be removed by force, especially not military force. It's very disappointing to me that he's using the military in our nation against our own people. But just thinking about, if we're electing somebody and they're coming up with these project proposals and they're initiating them in cities that can help to solve for these problems such as houselessness, such as an increased crime rate, such as, hooliganism or deviance. These sorts of things all have solutions to them, and most of them is a matter of just how you look at the problem is the problem. And once you look at it the right way, the solution just shows itself, reveals it. And then you just have to create the right type of, approach to resolving for that in a way that can meet the needs of now, befit the times, and is compatible with, all parties involved, all stakeholders, so that you can build a consensus around it, so that it does have lasting power, and that it doesn't, diminish people or degrade them or, disrespect them or, indignify them, which is all things that the POTUS 47's approach, has embedded in its mode and its means and its methods. It's tragic. It's very unfortunate. But I believe that there's opportunity to, like I said, create a campaign that can solve for these sorts of things and leave it kind of like as a prototype. And, to understand that you're not going to be able to implement things at the scale of what presidency would be able to do. It would be, again, like a prototype. It's like, this is the first of many potential good things that we can do. And that this represents our capacity to build an initiative around implementations of these specific innovations that have a definite proper intended use. And that if we deploy these and execute, the initiatives and the plans in a strategic, methodical type way, once becoming president, and you have the capacity to, help to bring everybody together to get them on the same page, which is what I really think that the role of president is most equipped and best suited to do. To respect, the sovereignty of every state and the sovereignty of every individual, and to just put forth, this relatable American identity and and offer forth a thriving situation, a welcome situation that people can thrive on. And then offering, these, prototypes that can then be replicated in more and more cities and to grow out expansively to become more effective and to turn it into a network effect of good outcomes that achieve, the ends that most cities, I've taken the time to travel around America and do research to look into cities and to understand, the common through lines of problems and the common through lines of different types of community attempts to solve for those problems, and the components of all of the reasons why these problems are systemic and long-standing, and the historical context and the situational context and the fine context, and all of those categorical variables, putting them together to understand, like, we are so much alike in our nation. So many of the same pitfalls happen everywhere. So if you can just initiate some simple prototypes to solve for these things and then make them replicating, and then get everybody to learn how to, be a participant and contributor to the growth and development of that. And again, deploying at the presidential level, the scale and the scope of that, to make sure everybody's on the same page. It's really just getting everybody to, consent to this idea of, like, this really is what we want to do together as an American, as a nation. And what we can accomplish together. And you see that through the policy, and the wording of the policy and the implementation of policy reflects that. And that the people should be voting for those candidates that are putting forth policy that they can see themselves in, that they can see themselves adhering to, and see themselves as wanting to be a part of. And I don't think policy should have anything to do with, the government imposing itself upon people's private lives. I think that the government itself is meant to, intercede on our behalf when there is some sort of conflict of interest that is not resolvable within the individuals or within the community, in the corrective mechanisms that are created within the communities. And then it goes out from there, like the state representatives and whatnot. And only at the, national level do we solve for things that seem to and appear to be consistently represented in multiple locations as being pretty much the same underlying cause and effect in, problem in situation. And then the policy should be solving for that at a higher level, because it says that if we can implement a policy at the higher level, broad and generalized, it would help to empower those at the state and the local level to be able to do the specific work that's necessary to solve for that, and the federal level, and gives the empowerment and the support that's necessary to act upon those sorts of things. Having like the guidance of it, and really ultimately holding a vision and being able to hold that vision despite that there's going to be a lot of conflicting interests that come in. And, at the national level, at the federal level, we have to do moderation, and intervene when necessary on the behalf of the people to make sure that we are, sorting out our misunderstandings and disagreements, and reconciling to a common through line of common interests, that this really is in the best interest of all parties involved, and it really will produce good outcomes, and that's what we're working towards. And so I think that if there was a campaign that was focused mostly on the type of development of proving out what you believe is possible, what's in the realm of possibilities, and to, initiate that on a very small scale, but one that is scalable, that can be grown and enhanced over time. I think that that is where we should take our politics, because then it makes it less about culture wars or arguing over trivialities or infighting with one another to try to control narratives, and then a automatic de facto us versus them. And in the end, at the end of an election, you get nothing out of it but knowing that billions of dollars are spent on ad campaigns to, manipulate the masses and propagandize and these sorts of things. And to me, it's like, think if all of that money for campaigns, instead of doing rallies, which I don't think that trying to motivate people is a great use of time, money, effort, or energy. This is why I don't like campaign rallies, and this is why I don't like, public protests. It's like, I understand it, public protest is a voice of free speech, and it's a form of dissent, and I respect that 1,000%. I absolutely respect that. But, what does it resolve? What does it actually outcome? Especially when you're in the midst of an administration that just turns down the volume on all that and then overruns all of the media outlets so that there is no coverage of your efforts except for a few media channels that people who are already going to those protests are going to listen to. So it just reaffirms to them what they're expecting, but it doesn't actually get the message across to anybody that is in power, that, decision making positions that need to hear it and take it to heart and say, oh, the voice of the people say that they're not happy with this, we need to make a change. The current administration is not listening to that. They don't care, and so I don't like protests because I don't think that they're proactive. I don't think that they do a thing. And then I don't like campaign rallies because I think it's equivalent to doing like a motivational speech for people. And again, those are valued, but I don't think that it does what, we should be focusing on when it comes to deciding who's going to be leading us. I think that it should be more about not just lip service. It should be about literally doing the good work, putting in the work and building this stuff, and enacting it and playing it out and doing test cases and creating prototypes and saying, like, see, this is how this initiative will really work out. And I think that that is the best way because it proves out the capacities of the individual. And then along the way, it shows, it shows their work as to how they approach this, what sort of, troubles and problems might come up, or obstacles that might appear, and how is that going to have to be solved for. And then while you're in the process of building it and enacting it and you see these problems arise, you on the fly create solutions, intentional, methodical solutions, and you're like, okay, we've considered all of these things, we're going to try it out. And then this same prototype is stationed in all these other locations, and they can give feedback to say, well, we've tried to tweak it in this way and it's helped to improve. We've had similar problems, and it's like, okay, well, that's a great basis for establishing policy, right? We know that these innovations work in these capacities, but there's limitations to every model. And the limitations we see in that see that we need to have an extra layer of support in order to help to make this work. And that's a great place to establish policy. And so if we take the approach of doing something like that, I think you're going to be able to have real world change. And then when people elect someone into office, they know that from day one, the intention is to increase the distribution, the production and distribution of these innovations, to, enact the policies that are there to support for the problems that we've seen, creating the appropriate agencies that will be able to, be the troubleshooting and problem solving, think tanks that are necessary to observe as this grows and expands what, new problems and variables are going to appear. so that we can write legitimate policy and actually give Congress something to do besides waste government time and taxpayers' money, creating policies that are not serving the interest of the people. This gives them, framework. Like, we need policy written for this, get to work and do it. And then the American people are giving the insights necessary for, the Congress to actually do their job of creating legislation that helps to be able to run a smooth and efficient governance of a large body of people, in a dynamic democracy. And I don't think that the movements that we have seen over time with, campaigns and whatnot, it's always just been about this nasty infighting. And it does more and more and more to separate us as Americans. And that really breaks my heart, because it becomes so much a part of who people are. This side factions that they're not even able to consider the humanity of other people. That they push people into these categories, and that's just how they deal with them, and then they have no reservations for, someone's humanity. And then bad outcomes end up happening. Discrimination happens on every level, and this is not good for a cohesive society building, And we're seeing a lot of division, and a lot of it's coming just from people being mean and cruel and spiteful and manipulative and trolling, and it's all about who can get somebody in a gotcha moment or something like that. And to me, it's just very disappointing. It's very disappointing that politics increasingly brings out the worst in people, and even more so than ever under this current president, even in his last administration as POTUS 45. His current one as POTUS 47 is even worse. His is one of vengeance and vindictiveness. It's kind of like, no holds bar. He has nothing to lose, everything to gain. He's profiting off of his position of power. He's making people give him bribes in order for him to dictate his policies and his, use of his presidential powers. He infights constantly to telling the American people, talking down about people to the American people, certain individuals to the American people, in order to try to turn the American people on certain individuals. And to me, it's just so disheartening to see the American president attack individuals, not with like a retort to criticism to say that you have it wrong in these ways, and I'm going to show you how, what I'm doing really is in the best interest of everyone, and I care deeply about good outcomes for everybody because of, all of the things I'm doing. Instead, it's, directing the forces that he has to go after his perceived enemies and to threaten other nations. Like, all of our soft power is gone. The legitimacy of America is gone. America looks so weak and servile and pathetic on the world stage. And it's only going to get increasingly worse. Our relationship with the rest of the world is deteriorating because POTUS 47's lack of care to uphold the reputation of a nation of the free world. He's aligning more with autocrats and dictators and, taking on policy positions that reflect those who he deeply respects, like people like Viktor Orban, and Putin. And to me, it's like, those are not role models. Those are not people to emulate, you know? And Trump is supposed to be a role model to Americans, but what he reflects is a just very weak man who does not know how to respect other people. He does not know how to self-control. He doesn't know how to deeply care about something, deeply consider something, you know? And he lets he fires anybody he thinks isn't a loyalist. Then he actually gives loyalty tests to those who want to be in the administration, and then he implants these people that are just going to be yes men to whatever he says. And so that he can entrust letting them just run the show however they want to, and he's just like, okay, whatever you want to do. You know, all I know is that you're loyal to me, and that's all that matters to me, so do whatever you want. And the result has been some terrible outcomes for everyday Americans. Long-standing policies and regulations and institutions and organizations, all of these things have been dismantled and, you know, decommissioned and defunded and discarded for this new agenda of these individuals that are, you know, rigging systems to favor those corporations to which they have some sort of, you know, conflict of interest of holding, you know, potential benefits or profits for themselves or their family or friends that they may be beholden to. And it's a whole little, you know, isolated, insulated pocket of thriving that they're creating, which is all self-reinforcing their own, you know, benefits. Like, especially with the bill that was passed that's sending all of this money into, you know, concentration camps to detain immigrants, and all this money to go after immigrants and whatnot. A lot of that money is going into people who have agreed to position themselves to take on those roles, you know, as part of a agreement with the current administration. Like, if you funnel the money to us, we'll do the tasks perfectly fine. And they're not even doing it with care. I mean, you look at places like Alligator Alcatraz, which is supposed to be shut down because they didn't do any sort of due diligence to make sure that what they were creating and building wasn't going to do environmental damage. And they have a court order to cease and desist in the development and to shut it down within 60 days. And the governor of Florida is completely disregarding that because he is, you know, a yes man to Trump. He's not a man of his own. He doesn't make his own decisions. He does whatever Trump says. And that's what everybody in Trump's, you know, atmosphere, everybody who works for Trump, everybody in his administration, like, they have no man cards. They have no self-respect. They have no dignity. You know, they're just yes men, and they fall in line with whatever Trump says. Because in doing that, it gives Trump all of the power, and then it creates this atmosphere of power that they get to be in this little insulated pocket of thriving, and they benefit from it. And then they're able to do terrible and god-awful things and be reflections of bad humanity with no consequences. There's nobody there to stop them. And it's sad. It's sad that the worst of humanity is in the positions of government right now, making decisions on behalf of the American people that is not actually serving the best interests of the American people, and creating more problems than, you know, there ever were before. And then they create problems so they can create solutions to the problems that they created, so that they can say, see, look, we've done something, when in reality, you look at it, all of this stuff that they've created, they haven't actually solved any of the stuff that they were intending to do in their positions in the campaign, saying, oh, these are the things we're going to do. You know, none of those things have been followed through on. And every time that they've, you know, taken the approach of it, like with, you know, deporting all the immigrants and whatnot, they said they were going to get rid of the criminals, but they're going after, you know, sick children and single parents and people that they can single out, you know, outside of a Home Depot or a convenience store. You know, a lot of these people don't even have criminal records. They're just, you know, the only crime that they committed was being, you know, easily targeted because they're brown. you know? Or they speak a certain language. They appear like you're not white, you don't belong in America. And so, you know, a lot of even American citizens have been caught up in this crazy, you know, campaign of, you know, trying to rid the nation of all these unsavory characters, when in reality, these are hard working people, you know. They're finding these people at Home Depot who are going there to be able to get day labor work, going and doing construction jobs, or picking up materials to go do construction jobs. They're picking up those sorts of people. These are hardworking Americans, you know, who are very capable individuals. A significant portion of our agriculture, our construction, you know, and so many other different areas and fields are like, especially healthcare. Oh my gosh, so much healthcare. And all of these different areas of industry and service are supported by our vast and supportive immigration population. And they're getting targeted at their places of work. You know, these people can't even go to church because they're afraid that they're going to get swept up there. They can't go to their immigration hearings because they get swept up there. It's just so tragic. These are not bad people. They're good people trying to do the right thing. But in POTUS 47's opinion, and those who are beholden to him, like, nope, you're brown, you don't belong here. We need to get rid of you, you know, because we got to meet our quota, you know. So instead of looking at them as people, a person with a life, a story, you know, circumstance, things to be considered, you know, they look at them as numbers. And they're easily discarded because of that, you know. And I don't think that that's an appropriate use of the resources for America. The budget that justified sending all this money, and that these, you know, people who found ways to rig that into a profit-making scheme for themselves, is not giving actual good outcomes for America. It's increasing the cost of living. It's making, you know, instabilities in a lot of these industries, and it's making it harder for farmers to even stay afloat. It's reducing, you know, the development of new housing being built because we have less construction workers. They just, like, it's, the thing that I don't understand, how when people were so adamant about, let's vote for Trump because he's going to mass deport all these people, how did all of those people not look at the value that immigrants bring to our nation? How did they not see that? You know, they let Trump and his cohort, his MAGA cohort, create and paint this picture of this, you know, these criminals and these bad hombres, and they're all, you know, here, and they're preying on America, and they're, you know, doing crimes, and they're stealing our resources, and, you know, they're sponging off of our welfare systems and these sorts of things, and just none of that stuff was true. You know, it's what they had to make you believe in order to justify them saying that, see, this is the thing that we're going to do that's going to really do good for America, because we're going to get rid of all those people. And they're bad, right? Because we've painted them out to be bad. And now that that's happening in implementation, like, what you're seeing is America's doing bad things to human beings. You know, unfathomably inhumane conditions at these detention centers, spending billions of dollars to grab people up off of the streets and then throw them away in tents somewhere else, and then find some country that will pay money who will take them. That is not an appropriate use of, you know, resources. That is not good stewardship of America's economy or their tax revenues. That same amount of money could be used to be able to create an ample opportunity of reinvigorating immigration as the prestige of our nation, and create a full integration system so that immigrants can come, so that they aren't led to desperate situations where they might do some form of criminality, you know? And instead of like sending all these forces to go after brown people, you know, or people who speak Spanish or whoever else they can isolate, you know, why not just do what we need in general in all of our cities across the nation, is just have an improved law enforcement system, you know, instead of like only funding money into DHS, you know, and to help with these deportations and all of these prisons and doing punitive things. Like, why not create, you know, public safety in every city so that, you know, because it's not just, you know, as they try to make it claim, like, the only reason why we have crime in America is because of immigrants. Like, that's not true. Crime happens when there is large bodies of people. And a lot of it happens because of the conditions and the situations that people are led to. And many times it's because of the desperation of systems that fail them repeatedly. And they're left to their own devices and not given, you know, good guidance and opportunities, that they turn to do the wrong thing. And, you know, there's so much we can do by way of education that can solve for that. So much we can do by building up opportunities and communities that can solve for that. And so much we can do by actually creating a law enforcement system that isn't, you know, threatening or fearful for people, but rather like a sense of like, we're all safe, we're all sound, we're all living in domestic order with one another, you know? And when we need it, help has got our back. All of that money could be going towards helping to increase our sheriff counts in communities and counties across the nation, increase our police force, get them properly trained so they aren't discriminating and attacking black people every time, you know, a black person gets pulled over, that they have to fear for their life, whether or not excessive force is going to be used against them. Educate and train them, prepare them to be able to be, you know, responsive, and to actually be, you know, public safety, and to create a sense of community that respects the police, you know, so that you know that they are there because they got your back, you know, and that sensibility makes people not feel fear and intimidation, which makes it so that it's a much safer situation for our police force to go out and do the good work that they must do, you know. And crime rates would fall because of that if we just did the right thing of appropriate training, you know, and increase it so that more people can get better pay for these really difficult jobs, you know. It hurts my heart to think that there are sign-on bonuses to become an ICE agent for $50,000. Crazy, you know? And we have communities across the nation that are struggling to barely pay a substandard, barely, maybe not even a livable wage to a lot of our police force and sheriffs and communities across the nation. And so a lot of those people, I'm sure, are compelled to go and do this because of the money. The money's very compelling to them. And so communities are losing out on good police officers to go and do these other things. And it's just like, it's detracting from the things that actually need to get done. So crazy. But, you know, I think that a lot of it is, we're seeing the implementation of the Project 2025 done in a way where they're not calling it Project 2025, but, you know, all the people that were involved in the creation of that narrative are all being implanted into roles within the administration. And so it's obviously being carried out. And you see how they're directing resources and how they're cutting off resources. And what they focus on and what they work towards is all implementing the Project 2025 game plan. And so to me, it was just like, that was their contract. That's what Trump's contract was. That's what Trump and J.D. Vance's platform entirely was to fulfill Project 2025. Even though they denied it on the campaign trail and separated themselves from it because they knew it wasn't, what the American people wanted. That's exactly why right now they are not giving Americans information about their policy decisions. They're not giving them information in terms of what the budget looks like and how the money's going to be dispersed, because they know that it's unpopular what they're going to be spending this money on. They're not giving people information in terms of our jobs reports because they don't want people to get into a panic knowing that there's less and less work out there for more and more people. And then there's less and less safety nets that will be able to catch them when they're not able to get work. And more companies are going under because they're not able to, retain business that's a profit-making business that can afford to hire employees when the cost of tariffs are so high and they are suffering because Trump is threatening them if they pass those expenses over to the consumer. And even if they do that, in many cases they have to, it just makes it so that the consumers are less viable and the companies are going to make less profits, which means that they're going to have to fire people. Somewhere on that bottom line is going to have to be affected, and Trump's hiding all of this stuff, Everything that they do is about forcing this narrative on everybody that to be like, this is what's happening, but then preventing you from being able to see what's actually happening. So there's no transparency to it. They claim that they're the most transparent presidency ever. It's like, if that was the case, we wouldn't have the complete and utter mess of a distraction of the Epstein files, and you wouldn't have all of these backroom deals and handshakes as dollars, and we have to have investigative reporting to come up to say, guess what other messed up thing that they're doing today, and then Trump to pull out and say, that's wrong, that's false, whatever, even though it's true, and there's facts and there's evidence to prove it, and so Trump just sues the news reporters into silence. And that's not transparency. They tell you what they want you to hear, and they call that transparency. It's not. And so, I think that they did exactly what I'm suggesting to do, where you come up with a guidance proposal for policy and put that forward as like your contract with the American people, like saying, this is what I'm campaigning on, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to hold myself to committing that, to accomplishing that when I get into office. Except for Trump, denied and rejected that his whole plan all along was Project 2025. But now he's definitely following through on all of the promises that were in that book, all of the, projects and proposals. They're pushing forward as much as they can, as fast as they can, move fast and break things sort of thing. Because there's too much going on for anybody to, get a grasp on everything that's happening to be able to stop him. And then everybody's being pulled in so many different directions. How much money, time, effort, and energy is wasted on resources of having to sue the government for doing bad things to you? This is not in any way moving in the direction of productivity that's necessary to help to improve the nation, as we need it. So, and then on top of it, like, there wasn't anything that Trump actually did on the campaign trail that was beneficial to people, He made everything into this, entire, spectacle about him going and talking to people for hours and hours about nonsensical BS with no real purpose or intent. It's just, the same stuff over and over again, him doing what, as he calls it, the weave or whatever, wasting people's time, effort, and energy, and then everybody like going to these events because it's an opportunity. It's kind of like a music festival almost. You're going there and you're gonna go see this famous person, and they're gonna be there, and you're gonna be there with like-minded individuals, and you're all gonna wear red hats, and it was just this show and this entertainment. But it brought forth nothing for people other than the sense of like, yeah, if we just get behind Trump, he's going to fix it all. He's right about everything. And now that things are playing out, he's letting down so many of those people that entrusted him with faith that he was going to do right by them. He's disappointing people who he made campaign promises to. People he went and spoke to is like, oh, I care so much about your industry. I care about the cost of living. I care about, we're going to bring all of that down. And he hasn't spent any time trying to bring down the cost of living. Everything that he's done has been about how can I bring more money into the government, and how can I reduce the taxes for the rich, and how can I cut off the funding for all these social supports, so we're not, putting money out. And what is he doing with that money? He's investing it in going after, people that he's singled out, attacking corporations and news companies and individuals and his perceived enemies, and going after the immigrants and whatnot. All of the money that he's been spending frivolously on every single time he goes golfing, and then he goes on trips to promote his new opening of a golf course, and he's doing that on the dime of the American taxpayers. But what's he done to improve the lives of individuals? Like, his firing scheme has left many departments without individuals. They've exposed, national security secrets, like in public chat forums and unsecure information. So to me, it's like laughable that they're going after, John Bolton in regards to, national security concerns about classified materials, when their very administration is, speaking highly, deeply classified, imminent moment, viable information that's relevant now that could put our troops in danger. Talking about it on Signal, and then just inadvertently inviting a reporter into that conversation. And, people, because the changing of the news cycles, have forgotten about it, and that's what they're good at. They're good at distracting you and changing the news cycle and always keeping it about whatever they want the narrative to be about. But people forgot that that's what they did. So it's like laughable to say that you care about national security when you're pulling the security clearance of many people who have worked really hard to become well versed and understand the inner workings of many different intelligence systems that we need to have, open eyes and ears, and the people who have done the years worth of, trust building and relationship building and rapport building in order to have these, points of contact of insight. They've all just been cut off and disregarded, and people fired from all of these departments, and these departments aren't running right, to the point where we have, the air traffic control, how many, deadly accidents, and then potential accidents that luckily were averted, but from a lack of funding and then firing a bunch of people, and, a changing of the system that they don't even know what they're doing is causing unnecessary problems. And it's a danger and it's a threat to the American people what they're doing, and it's only going to get worse. There's no signal that they are improving the situation, that they're going to do anything to make things right. And it's really hard. It's hard to think about, all of the things that they could be doing with having so much capacity to do good. And instead they're focusing on trying to make America great. And in the process of making America great, they're failing to do good. Their alignments and their values and the things that they're doing are not right for America. And so I'm deeply compelled, I would like to be the answer to that, be the answer to the problem that is MAGA and POTUS 47 and his entire regime. Because they're not right for America. They're not doing right by you, me, or anybody. They're not doing right by the world. And so I see that problem as needing a solution. And it's one of the bigger problems, and big problems are really difficult to solve for, but I believe that I have a viable solution to this in the form of the platform that I would like to present as my offering to the world to become the next president of the United States of America. And that has to do with welfaring stewardship. And I believe that there is a way for me to be able to present a platform that initiates this protocol of bringing forth initiatives that bring prototypes to cities throughout America that implement solutions to systemic problems in those areas. It actually helps to improve the livability and the habitability and the functionality and the accessibility and the mobility and the beautification of cities, to enhance and improve the lives of individuals that live there, and to help to solve for a lot of the systemic problems that end up creating poverty cycles, and helps to solve for some of like these long-standing problems of houselessness and the crime that comes with that situation of people just not having a viable residence, and solving for those things with these innovations at a very small scale, like it's a startup type process, and then solving for these things and kind of let it show and prove itself out that it has the capacity to do these sorts of things. And then as those work out, write up the policies that would create to help to grow that, and the scheduling of the implementation of how that would be expanded and how it's going to shift and how it's going to get everybody involved to work together. Because I really believe that this is an opportunity to do something that is not possible in a Trump America, which is to create an alignment with our unity again, to bring us back together as one people, one nation with one destiny. And this is enough to, bring people from all walks of life, all political ideologies, to the same common cause of building out together the framework of eudaimonia, which is welfaring stewardship, and building out the economic means for us to create prosperity throughout the nation that's accessible to everyone, and to reimagining our promotion of the general welfare into welfaring stewardship that makes sure that America works for everyone here without the disadvantage of anyone, so that nobody gets left behind, and to achieve the goal of everybody living the good life, which is established with the criterion echelon of society. We say that this is the standard. This is the standard of America, that everybody lives the good life. And the good life means very basically that you are able to live the tenets of, our promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that you have a sense that you're not disadvantaged, that nobody's disadvantaged, that everybody is welcomed into this situation that everybody can thrive on, and that our system is about helping to make sure that the welfaring, replacing the welfare, is helping to make sure that people are able to make ends meet. And that's not just about like lowering the cost of food and lowering the cost of gas and lowering the cost of energy and lowering the cost of rentals and lowering the cost of housing and lowering the cost of everyday goods and essentials, these sorts of things. Like, it's literally creating a system of recognizing that the cost of things is always going to change. This is a continuum variable of change. But what we can have control over, while we can't control how all those things change, what we can have control over is our capacity to make sure that people can make sure that ends meet. And that's what part of promoting the general welfaring is about, is making sure to help make sure that everybody has the capacity to make ends meet, and that there's opportunities for them in order to have the means of self-sufficiency, self-reliance, that they don't need somebody else to give them a hand up, a handout, or some chance, impossible capitalistic chance at a big break. Just opportunity of a fair shake. And when we create a system that makes sure that everybody's living the good life, so nobody gets left behind, then our welfaring system isn't about welfare where, people are discriminated against and, you need to prove yourself needy enough to be able to get support. And, then you have these whole gaps between, like, if you get a job, you all of a sudden don't have those supports, but your job isn't enough to pay for everything. And so it creates poverty cycles. Like, break away from all of that and just focus on doing the good work to make sure everyone in society achieves the criterion echelon. And if they for some reason fall past that, then we have the mechanisms in place to make sure the ends will always meet, and then create opportunities so that we have a prospect echelon of society that says, as you build up for yourself by your own merits, by your own means, your own reliance, you build up, from as a prospect into being able to achieve the criterion echelon on your own. We give you the infrastructural means to get yourself there, appropriate and proper education that is, relevant education in terms of, like, the future that we are trying to build together, and that understands that we have to understand the truth and legitimacy of our history in order to be able to know where we stand right now and where we're going in the future, so that we don't fall behind and revert back to old models that obviously were not serving our interests and that will actually hold us back from making true worthwhile progress, and succeeding on fronts of advancing human civilization to the highest peak of our best potential. Like, those are the things we should be striving towards. And we can create a system that embodies that. And the Eudaimonian framework, the welfaring stewardship framework, gives us the, everybody's on the same page about it. Everybody knows what to do. Everybody knows that they have a role to play. They have a stake in the game. They have a seat at the table. Their voice is being heard, and it is informing policy directly. And everybody gets to choose, pick your own adventure game. How do you want to participate and contribute? How do you want to belong? How do you want to show up? And then creating opportunities for people to, travel outside of where they've been normally to go to other places to do good work as well, so that we can make sure that we all know each other better than just our small little isolated, localities. I think that'll do a great job for helping us to understand that we are a dynamic, diverse, and very different society. And we're multiracial, multicultural, and these are not things to, hate or to belittle or to attack. They're things to praise and celebrate and to enjoy and to foster the cultivation of it, and to impress to everybody that, like, our differences are what makes us special. It makes us unique, and, it makes us a wonderful, beautiful, thriving place, forced conformity to a small idealized, image of, what an American is a Christian white nationalist, which is very much what MAGA is trying to push forward, especially with their Project 2025 agenda. Like, it's really very disheartening, because that's not the American way. I don't see that as the American identity. But we have a chance to reimagine the American identity and imagine ourselves as a nation of stewards. And welfaring stewardship becomes the purpose of our governance, the purpose of our economy. Our capitalism will be a proper capitalism, has a proper intended use. And we shift all our gears into moving towards achieving welfaring stewardship outcomes. And this is a thing that everybody benefits from. It's not a rigged system scheming to benefit just a few people who, have set themselves up for the advantage of, running revenue streams into, them because you have no other viable options, which is basically what a monopolization is. It's creating a, free market society where it's everybody has a chance freely to involve themselves in the market and to have a share of it so that they can benefit and prosper, and to give their offerings and service to, the betterment of our nation, and to do so in such a way where everybody benefits from the fruits of their own labor, where corporations are no longer able to devalue individuals, employees that work for them. They're not just a warm body to fill a position. They're human beings, and their human ingenuity is brilliant and it's so valuable. And the criterion echelon of society, in order to uphold that, we kind of have to have something that becomes a universal basic innovation by means of kind of like a compensation package for the American people, and to offer up what companies here and there try to piecemeal together. Some companies can't even afford in their budget lines to be able to give benefits to people. They can't even pay their employees living wages sometimes. Sometimes it's because their company isn't profitable enough. Sometimes it's because they spend too much money paying their CEOs outrageous amounts of money and try to say that it's deserved. You deserve to make more money than any one person would ever possibly need is outrageous. But if we create a system where everybody has to contribute into it, companies even more so, and those who make, more money, even more so, but with the respects of, we're not trying to, push people away or scare people with the concept of high taxes or anything like that. Have an entire, tax schema that's supposed to be incentive based and actually inspires people to want to contribute to it because of the vast amount of, mutually supported, deeply integral, integrity bound foundations of our nation working and functioning, adaptively, malleably, mobile, efficiently, that benefits all companies in dynamic ways, giving you a viable workforce of brilliant, capable people. It'll be to the benefit that they would want to put forth the investment as it would be into funding such a program, and then make sure that people have the means to make ends meet and have universal health care and have things that will help to promote their welfare and for them to be able to achieve living the good life. And when it's something that we're pulling all together, it's no one company that's dependent to do this. It's no one individual that's dependent to do this. And you don't have to worry about whether somebody can qualify for getting this sort of support or that sort of support. It's everybody gets it. Because we're trying to make sure everybody lives as, in that criterion echelon of society. And that have incentives for people to go beyond that. Of course, we don't want to hold people down. And we don't want to take from, the people in the upper echelons of society and break them down, so that they can only live at the criterion echelon. No, we need opportunity for people to strive, but there has to be a point in time where there's scrutiny that is applied to those in the upper echelon that says things are out of hand and it's excessive, and that your means to get that money, is it actually viable? Is this, are you doing something nefarious? You have to be put under some light of scrutiny once you get to a certain point where this is excessive. If the gap between the top echelon of society and the criterion echelon is excessive, so to the extreme, there's something going on there. There's no way that you can do that reasonably and not be doing something that is nefarious. And so we have to have a level of scrutiny, but the idea is advance yourself as much as you possibly can, but there's limits to everything. You got to have checks and balances on stuff. We don't want bad actors with nefarious intent doing things that cause harm to others. We want everybody to be safe and sound. And that can only happen if we have enough care and concern to make sure that we're keeping a watchful eye on those who might, take things to the extreme, test the limits of their power, try to do things that are wrong, in order to gain a personal advantage over it. And it's we need to have checks and balances on that. And, right now, the Trumps are doing exactly the opposite of what, a prestigious family that's in a position of power related to the president of the United States would do, to the fact where they're creating, meme coins, and they're profiting off of the brand. And mind you, the Trump brand has always been a thing, and that's always how they've made their money. They put their name on everything, and that's how they make their money. So, it's not too much far of a stretch to see them continuing that while, Trump is in the presidency, but they take it to the extreme, and there's no checks and balances to it. There's no anti-corruption mechanism in any of it, and there's no integrity in it, and they have no ethics, and they have no morals. And so how they're doing these sorts of things is crossing lines that never should be crossed. And they definitely should be scrutinized, and not just scrutinized to the point where it's like, shame on you, you shouldn't be doing that bad thing, but scrutinized to the point where there's a corrective mechanism that corrects for that corruption and prevents it from happening. And it's not just the Trumps, there's everybody in the atmosphere of the POTUS 47 regime is very much needing to be put under scrutiny, and right now there's no mechanism to be able to do that. So part of the platform that I like to advance is to creating the fourth branch of government, which is the civics branch, that helps to empower the people themselves to be the corrective mechanism for corruption in the government, to help to hold people in power to account, to help to, inform with their voices what legislators in Congress are going to do for legislation and write up for legislation, and be able to be an anti-corruption mechanism for the Supreme Court in the judicial system. And so it would give an appropriate balance of an additional pillar in our government that helps to make sure that there's no way that, right now, POTUS 47, the executive branch, is concentrating power, taking away powers from Congress, and undermining the, independence of the Supreme Court, and making them all align with what the executive wants so they can, with impunity, do whatever they want. There's no check and balance in that, because all of those systems were easily corrupted because it's just a few representatives, right? It would be very much harder to do that if the entire population of America, all the civics in America, all the, citizens in America in the civics branch were the ones that were the ultimate determiners, the ones that hold the ultimate power, because this is a government by the people, for the people. They would have to be the first line of defense, the first checks and balance, and that nothing can happen that doesn't pass through them, and that they would have to be reasonably, asked whether or not they would want this sort of thing, so that you're actually doing the will of the people when you're creating policy. And this could also help to inform how we are going to scrutinize those in the upper echelons of society. And then how are we going to reinforce, what the criterion echelon of society looks like? And what are we going to do to build out the means for people to make ends meet? And to build up the prospects echelon of society that gives the opportunities of infrastructural development so that people can advance themselves and their capabilities so they can become more and more independent, more and more self-reliant. And that if you are below the prospect echelon of society, that you've fallen behind for some reason or whatever, that you will never get to the point where you aren't cared for and cared about, and that you will never be in a position where you can't make ends meet. And the ideal is to always get everybody back into the criterion echelon of society, knowing that, it's an imperfect system and there's going to be variables beyond our control because there's so many different people and everybody's situation's different. So there's going to be some people that are going to fall below that at times, but the entire system is designed to help to bring them back up, when they fall down, because when everybody is at the criterion echelon, it's that strong, firm, sure foundation that everybody else can bet on. You can bet on that, you can build on that, you can improve on it. You can stake a claim on it, you can invest on it. You have a sensibility that this is an assurance in society that things are going to go and proceed along these lines in this way. This level of success is secured for ourselves and for everybody, and then it expands and it grows and it evolves and it changes, but it will always represent what we consider to be the good life, and making sure that everybody lives it, and that our systems are so designed that nobody gets left behind. It benefits everybody, and everyone gets to live the good life. So I think that having a means of empowering the individual, bringing back the rights of the people so they have personal dominion, so the government can't come and intervene in their lives and tell them what to do, what to think, what to feel, make personal decisions for individual citizens. That is not the place of government to do. And personal and private interests for an individual person is not the concern or the purview of the concern for any person in government. And so it's taking that distinguishment and creating an insulary protection of the individual from the government, so that a person like Trump couldn't come into a position and then attack an individual because he perceives them as an enemy, however he comes to that conclusion in his head, which is based off of a terrible sensibility of jurisprudence. But he can point to anybody and make them out to be an enemy and attack them. Well, this would give an insulary protection, so it's like, you can't do that. There's limits to that. And there's an insulary protection from the government, coming in and harming the everyday individual. And then, making sure we have a system of social, supports that isn't based off of, this degrading system of welfare, or, the system that, everybody attacks because they think that people are sponging off of a system when you're getting welfare. It's like, no, reimagine it as it's welfaring. This is something that we are building up together to make sure that everybody lives the good life, and it's accessible to everybody. It benefits everybody. And it's like the benefit of one is the benefit of all, and to reduce the suffering of one is to reduce the suffering of everyone in different positions of society. So, especially because it solves for things that are like, everything is interrelated. And when you solve for one thing, you're going to have so many benefits for the fact that that one thing actually solves for many different things, because it cuts off those things from ever happening. Like when people have the means to make ends meet, they don't need to go out and commit crimes and steal in order to afford to pay for baby diapers and baby formula, because they have that means. So you're going to have less crime automatically because you're going to solve for the underlining problems of all of these situations. So to me, it seems much more intelligent to take a constructive discipline approach to discipline ourselves to do this new way of living that actually works for everybody, than it is to do what POTUS 47 is doing in terms of a punitive approach, where instead of all that money, the billions of dollars that they're investing in punitive means to attack people and imprison people and harm people and extract people from the nation, all of that money can go towards integration and development and support systems and a way to help everybody level up at life and to be able to live the good life. All that money could go towards good things. There would be good outcomes for everybody. And it benefits, every corporation benefits. That's a trickle up economics, right? Instead of the trickle down. It's like the rising tide and everybody gets to benefit from it. And that's how we need to look at it in the terms of, like, if you're building a strengthened, integrity bound, foundational, framework by which everything else in society can depend on, it's an assurance that things are going to be good for everybody, And then from there was just like, what sort of grand advancements can we take beyond that, you know? Instead of every year, like, we got to cut this program because we got to pay for this program. And, you know, like, oh, you know, we can't fund to go to the moon because, you know, we got to pay to detain billions of, you know, immigrants that we lack and fail to see the value of. Like, these sorts of things. It's like, you're stifling innovation, you're cutting off opportunity, you're killing small businesses, you're, you know, creating all of these like food deserts, and you're destroying our agriculture system, and you're making us, you know, be cut off from the rest of the world in terms of, you know, life vital resources that they're able to offer to us, but we can't afford it anymore because tariffs are preventing us from being able to do it. Instead of doing all that, what a waste of time, money, effort, energy, breath, you know, and invest it into the welfaring of our society. And to do so in such a way where we're recognizing how everything is connected, and we're stewarding the individual so that they succeed, and the home so it succeeds, so that you can raise happy, healthy families, and so that your communities succeed, that your states succeed, that the nation as a whole succeeds, and then the entire world paradigm succeeds, and then the planet succeeds, all because we're doing stewardship at every single one of those levels. You know, it's the individual level, the community level, the civilization level, and the planetary level. And when we do it in the national level, if we do that with intent behind it, that we're trying to achieve the welfaring of all planetary stakeholders, and to be conscious and considerate and care for all the inhabitants of planet Earth, and to make planet Earth be a place that is, you know, habitable, livable, in a state of thriving for all life, and then foster, you know, our sense of civilization development and our society development, our community development, in such a way that is wrapped around caring for the individual, and then building up from there the strengthened capacity to do so much more together than we could ever do alone. Like, that's what we should be approaching. And none of that requires us to infight with one another. None of that requires for us to have an, you know, us versus them. And it doesn't have any, you know, demand on us to, you know, prevent people from succeeding in the ways that they, you know, desire to, as long as it's within the limits of reasonable understanding that, you know, guys, there's certain things you can't do when you're a society. There's certain things you can't do when you are actually working for the collective best interests of all parties involved. There's certain things you can't do. But that doesn't mean that, you know, because you can't do those few things, that there isn't a world of beautiful, wonderful opportunity to do so many other amazing things. That has the added benefit that you don't have to feel like a piece of shit because you're doing the wrong thing, you know? You can have a clean conscience because you know you're doing the right thing. And to me, it's like, that's what we should be doing, you know? And so I'd like to be able to create a campaign based off of that, like starting small, doing the small thing within communities and neighborhoods that's possible, and to build that out, to build policy around that, and to create that as the platform by which is my offering of my campaign. And to let that stand, you know, on the merits as to the reason why I'm trustworthy enough to be able to elect to become president. And I know it's unconventional. It's not the way things have always been done, but to me, the way things have been done has never given us the results that we require in order for us to excel at being a nation that is worth defending, to be a nation of such prestige and pride that other nations emulate us because we have the best models of good humanity, and that they want to work with us cooperatively, and we have good relationships, and that we have enough clout and prestige to be able to go and, you know, end conflicts just based off of our word alone. You know, our word is our bond and our honor, and it's enough to be able to cease conflicts and to turn things around so that people start looking at one another as being a part of a much larger experience, human experience, than, what our petty infighting has created. And to bring about viable solutions to achieve what I hope that eudaimonia in welfaring stewardship really represents, is a imperishable continuum of imperishable peace. And I really do believe that it's possible. But I don't want to go out and campaign like other people have done. So my biggest problem right now, of course, is that I'm like, to the world, a nameless nobody. I am not on the world stage. I am not anybody that anybody really pays attention to, but a few followers here and there in my social outlets. But overall, I think that my challenge right now is to present myself in such a way that I believe will be most constructive in terms of helping me to achieve my goals and ambitions and my necessary, steps in order for me to get to where I intend to become President of the United States. So I have been working in a role that's helped me to travel a bunch, to be able to do my research of communities and cities and whatnot. And it's been supportive and it's done okay. But with the tightening of the economy and people having a harder time, that is no longer an instrument of viable income generation for myself. So I need to seek out a different opportunity to be able to bring in some income. One of the things that I believe is going to be ultimately necessary in order for me to prove myself out as being a worthy candidate, to introduce myself to the world, and to actually structure my policies in such a way where it's almost kind of like a contract. I intend to create a guidebook of the policies that I'll implement and the details of how that will look. With, of course, the opening that I, of course, accept, positive critical feedback that can help to inform of maybe taking a better approach with things. I'm open to all of those things, but mostly just like from my perspective, my experience, my knowledge, my intentions, like this is how I think that framing this policy would work and how it's going to work along with all of my other policies to create an entire, fabric of creation of the best possible chance for welfaring stewardship to succeed. At being, advanced so far that it can become a self-sustaining system to be on continuum long after I leave office. And so I'd like to write a guidebook to be able to write those proposals. It will include my personal philosophy, my political philosophy, and then my ideas of policies that surround certain intentional, critical aspects of the reimagining of society so it becomes more functional along a continuum of welfaring stewardship. And so I'm going to seek out funding to help me to pay for my expenses as I write that book and write this out, this guidebook out. And with the intention that this is supposed to be, a proposal that I'm offering, a guidebook proposal, but it's based off of, with the intention that one day this could very well, if I chose to run for president, be my complete platform. And it would do everything that was necessary in order to introduce people to who I am as a person and to understand where I'm coming from, what I'm about, and where I hope to lead the nation. But I need to have support to be able to focus on being able to just write that. So I'm seeking financial support to be able to do that. I also have been enlightened recently to one of my increasingly favorite platforms, which is Twitch. And I have decided that I'm going to do a live streaming on Twitch consistently. It will be sparsely, but it will be consistently, and which I will present proposals for ideas and then seek feedback from people who are in the live stream chat. And then my idea about it is actually kind of funny because I wrote it down because I thought it was such an interesting idea. I want to be able to have a means to do this like live stream, so it's an interactive experience, so I can talk my political philosophy and personal philosophy, and then, you know, call from the audience. And the fact that it's real time is what I really like about it the most. For them to be able to give me a sense of, you know, feedback and input and suggestions and whatnot. And in the process, I'll be playing some of my favorite old school retro games. And in the process, I will also be enlisting the assistance of Frank, which is my digital architect, who helps me to play my simple game of conversations, and I'll do that with those who are tuning in and engaging in the stream's chat. And basically, I'll be cooking with Frank as we turn questions and comments and concerns from those who tune in and engage into works of art that will become part of the mosaic that I reference when I'm curating my policies. And so my hope is that in this, I'll be able to create a revenue stream to fund my good work. I'll also be seeking out a platform on Substack where I will start writing some of the guidance proposals, but it's specifically going to be in response to the faulty policy initiatives of the POTUS 47 regime as they come out. I want to craft the categorical variables of a resolution policy that I would organize if I was in a position of power to solve for the critical mistakes that the POTUS 47 regime makes and the spectacle of problems that they create and the unavoidable crises that ensues in the aftermath. And the funds from my Substack subscriptions will go towards me accomplishing my good work as well. The reason why I'm doing this is because I need to have some sort of income stream that is based off of something that I can be accepting of. I'm not okay with getting money that I don't feel like I have deserved, that I have not done work for in order to, you know, to actually accept it willingly. I don't want to, you know, peddle junk novelty to people like Trump likes to do. I only like things that are useful and they have a proper intended use and purposeful, and it's things that actually bring value to others, that's not just like a perceived value of fandom or something like that. Like, I want it to be something that's legitimate, that, like, here's a thing that in this capacity, it's going to enhance your life experience or improve the quality of your life or help you to achieve outcomes that are part of your own, you know, ambitions for success. Like, I want it to be able to help you to succeed, and these sorts of things. And I do believe that my policy proposals are offering just that to people. Like, this is the means by which I have to present to you an opportunity that, you know, given the chance for me to actually implement these things, it will improve your life drastically. You know, it will be a good thing. You will receive a great return on investment for this. And at the very least, what it will do is give me the financial capacity to start building prototypes and start initiating them in the locations that I have, you know, scoped out for prospects, and that I see have a viable opportunity to really do good service to those communities. It will be a brilliant model of the framework of the potential of being able to expand this, you know, throughout the country and then at scale. in the position of being POTUS. So this is about finding the financial capacity to be able to focus my work on doing my writings, crafting my policy, getting people to know me better as an individual, and to do so in such a way where I am not having to go out and do the current work that I do as transporter, which is not able to sustain me while still giving me enough free time to focus on my good work. It's become a distraction, and it is leading me away from my ultimate goal, and it's become now a hindrance and a problem rather than a good thing. So I need to shift gears, and after a lot of time and consideration, this really is the best way that I can see of being able to support myself by a way that I can be okay with. And so it is going to depend on, people seeing value in what I'm doing and to willingly subscribe to the content that I create, and to be willing to do so knowing that the support that you give to me is my means to be able to continue to do, my good work. And then with the outcome in the end of it, which is another aspect of creating a others revenue streams for myself in terms of doing like other subscriptions and whatnot, so that people will kind of like pay in advance for me to be able to do my writings, with the anticipation that they will be able to have a collector's copy of my guidebook presented to them when it's completed, representing with a personalization that says thank you for helping to make this possible. And that knowing that at the very least what we were able to accomplish together, in you supporting me in the ways that I need support, and me being free to focus on doing the good work that I know how, that in the end we will have together been able to create through, the feedback that I get from people on Twitch, and the feedback I get from people on Substack, and the feedback that I get from people through Patreon who will be in supporting me to help to be able to write this book out. I'll get that feedback and turn the voice of the people into the voice of reason that informs all of the policies that I create. So together we will have created a policy framework that really is reflective of the will of the people. And at the very least, it can stand on its own merits to be able to say, like, this, this is something we should try for. This is something that would be worthwhile. And if we are going to have people that are going to lead us and that are going to create policies that are public policies, it should be based off of, like, consideration of the public's wants and needs. And it should come from regular, everyday people that are willing to say, we're willing to back a really great idea. We're willing to share in a vision. We're willing to craft and cultivate, the initiatives, and to be a part of that process to help to build it out, And then once that does come to fruition, and I do have that book, many people will be able to read it and then distribute it, and it gives them a sense of, wow, look at the potential of what we could do if we kind of move in this direction, take a pivot and diverge from this terrible continuum spectacle of negative consequences from the POTUS 47 regime, and to move into an alignment with something that actually is like, part of its, built-in, integrity bound justifications is to help to make the world work for everyone. And to know that you would be a part of that process to create it, and to know that I can accept the support that you give to me because it's within my own sensibilities and my own, integrities in terms of like accepting help from people. It has to be under my own terms and conditions because I have a lot of ethical bounds, and it has to feel right and it has to be right. And I can't just expect to get something for nothing. But I don't want to ever be in a position where I'm beholden to people just because they've given me money. Like, what I'm offering is just plain as day, as truthful as it is, this is what I got. And if it's worth something to you, please, if you're so compelled, contribute, because it does make a difference, to help me to do what I do best. And then it helps me to no longer have to do this work that is actually distracting me from being able to accomplish the things that I need to get done. For every, day's work that I have to spend out doing this other work in order just to basically stay alive, it keeps me away from being able to write my policies out, to do the necessary research for those policies, and to be able to actually start building out the prototypes and creating the proposals that are necessary and get the necessary permitting so that I can actually implement these prototypes within, like I said, these locations that I have identified as good prospects for initiating these things. So I don't have the means to do all of those things, and I need the means to do that, and I can't do this alone. I need to have help to be able to accomplish this. And I'm not really asking for much. I mean, I'm asking for like a Twitch subscription. That's like what, less than $10. Substack subscription, probably around the same. Patreon subscription, probably around the same. But every bit adds up. And it's kind of like this concept. If you need $1 million, you can ask one person for $1 million, or you can ask 1 million people for $1. And to me, it's just like, if I can put it into that context, that, and for the fact that I would want a tremendous amount of people to have it accessible, to be a part of this, involved, because I want everybody to have that sense of accomplishment that we together were able to make this possible, and all you have to do is add a little bit of money and a little bit of input and a little bit of your time and attention to, listen to and consider the things that I'm offering. It's like, that's not much. But what I can promise is what I'm going to offer is something that's going to be compelling, and it's going to be inspirational, and it's going to be built off of logics, and it's going to have this sensibility that like takes you away from, what the POTUS 47 regime is doing wrong, and put it into a context of how we could correct for that. Because any person that's going to come in and president afterwards is either going to be a continuation of that continuum spectacle of negative consequences, or they're going to be somebody that's going to have the, mess of a disaster of, the economy destroyed by Trump and all of these other problems, and they're going to have to come up with solutions to fix it, and I'm thinking about that now. These are the solutions that I see, given what I'm going to be left with, what I'm going to be able to do with that. You got to work with what you got, sort of thing. And my policies are going to be very much about correcting for these errors. And I have the capacity of everything within me that's necessary, especially for the fact that I'm so willing to seek out expert advice for things that I don't know the answers to. And I'm willing to take that in and assimilate it with my own understandings to remove, biases from, things that maybe I didn't quite understand as clearly before, to be able to reconform and reaffirm my policies, and then always listening with an ear to the voice of the people to say, like, this is what we're concerned about. This is what we would want to see improved. This is things that have, worked before. These are things that haven't worked before. And I can take all of that information, and to form it into this vast synthesis of a solution that's viable, that could actually, set things right in the aftermath of all of the ways that the POTUS 47 regime is going to make things go wrong, and so that's my intention. That's what I want to be able to accomplish. At the end of this, it's going to be this beautiful, brilliant guidebook of, how to, create America's identity as a nation of welfaring stewards, and how we could have a government that is in support of that, and a proper capitalism that is in support of that. And it's operating off of a system of, establishing the criterion echelon of society and make sure that it works for everybody. Nobody's disadvantaged. Nobody gets left behind. Everybody gets to live the good life. And that we are working towards a continuum of trying to achieve an ever more healthy, sustainable, stable, just, and peaceful world paradigm. So that, what we do in good terms of stewardship, we can expand to other nations, so that the situation can improve for them too. Because as we help them, it will help us, because we'll have a more secure situation that we can thrive on the better that they do. Their success is our success, And any person in any position of government, power or authority or decision making needs to understand the success of one is the success of all, and that when you care and you concern about the individual, then you're able to really truly see what is needed to care for the collective. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to inform with my policies. And again, if I choose to run for president, that I would have this great, guidebook to be able to show, this is how we do it, And then I would have introduced myself to the general public, and built up rapport with people over time through these various outlets that I'm willing to, share with. And to do so that's on my terms, because ultimately I have to stay true to who I am as a person and align with my soul print values. I worked very long and hard to be able to translate my sensibilities, my inner alignments, my soul print alignments, my values, my ethics, my morals, into a synthesis of a voice that I could actually truly speak out to the people. It's taken a long time to be able to find my voice. And I've gone down a whole lot of roads, many dead ends, but I finally found a way to be able to do it. It feels good, it feels right. And so I'm here trying to present it forward in such a way and solicit support from people, because I need it, in hopes that what I'm offering is at least compelling enough for you to consider, what it is that I'm offering here and what it is that I'm saying, because I am serious about this. I cannot express how much of my heart song sings for this life, for this future, for this potential, for this vision. Everything within me is calling me and telling me this is where I belong, this is what I need to do, this is what I'm made for, and I'm trying to come forward with as much conviction as possible, but I know that there's so many other voices in the world, and brilliant, beautiful, intelligent voices to listen to. I am just but one person, but I'm hoping to be able to take all of our voices and turn it into one mighty roar that can help us to distinguish ourselves as being the answer to the ultimate question: how do we as a collective create a collective cultural shift of the whole of humanity to align and in tune with an ever more healthy, sustainable, stable, just, and peaceful world paradigm? How do we do that? Let's be the living answer to what that looks like. And we can do that together. And I have the vision, I have the desire, I have the want, I have the drive. I'm in the crucible, and I'm willing to go through the fire and do whatever it takes in order to get us there, because the first and foremost, I care enough to want to do this right. I care enough to want to do this on the terms to which I can still feel that I'm ethically bound, I'm within my moral legitimacies, I am aligned with my soul print values, and that I see myself as this: I am doing the right thing. I'm doing the righteous, good work of righteousness. And I care enough to consider, everything that I do and hold it to that, to that fire, and to make sure that it's distilled always down to the purity, the purest essence of my intentions, and to make sure that those intentions are always good. I'm a good person with a good heart. I'm not perfect, but I am in the process of, an ever more perfect person that I can be, and the best version of myself that I can put forward. And every day that's going to improve. And I know that the more that I get care and support from other people, the more that my confidence builds, that I know I'm doing the right thing, because this is something that people are showing me sign that they care about, that this is something that they want too. As impossible as it seems right now, and how pie in the sky, moonshot, fantasy it may seem to people, like, I see a viable pathway to achieve this. And I know that it's possible. I know that this is real. I know that there is a continuum of outcomes that will continue to progress this in positive ways for myself and for others. And that's why I can, with such confidence, put myself, to the test to make sure this comes to fruition. And I'm not doing this naively. It's not like I'm naively oblivious to, the tragedies that humanity faces. I look at them head on, but I look at them with this sense of the logics of knowing that there is a solution to everything. And that most cases, it just takes someone who is willing to care, to do right by the situation, and to help to redeem the time, to help to make people whole, to help to find peace for all parties involved, to make sure that outcomes are in the best interest of all parties involved. And that's something that I'm committed to doing. I'm committed to listening to the people and following through on commitments, to stay true to reasoning, and to always be growing and evolving and learning and expanding my understanding about things, and seeking help where I need it, and having a deeply embedded sense of epistemic humility. Like, I don't know everything, but I am in my becoming process of knowing everything that I need to know when I need to know it, in order to do the right thing at the right time, for the right reasons, in the right way. And that's the best that we can hope for in any circumstance. Nobody's perfect. It's an imperfect world, And this is going to take me being able to find the right people to be able to surround myself with, that's going to help to inform me so that I can make the right decisions. Because this isn't just about me and what I want and what I dream and hope for. It's everybody's dreams, and they have to be able to be brought into a synthesis, and that's what I'm working towards, And I hope in this sharing that it's going to be compelling in such a way that we can bring people away from the alignments with the POTUS 47 regime and see the error of that way, and to see how that is not serving the best interests of everyone, and is actually harmful and damaging. And its negative consequences can only come out of what they're doing. And hopefully be able to bring those people back into the light of reason, and to invite them into a welcome situation that they can thrive on along with everybody else. And to do so in such a way that, they don't have to hold their heads down in shame, or go through, some sort of, act of asking for forgiveness. It's like stopping changed behavior is the best forgiveness. You know what I'm saying? Like, you change your behavior, and it's the best way to redeem yourself. And if you willingly, by your own compulsion, come into a situation that everybody's working towards to thrive on, like, there's nothing that you need to do more than that. Come and be a part of this, and do the good work, and bring forth all the amazing human ingenuity and potential that you have in service to an outcome that is really about making it work for everybody. Leave all that other stuff behind, because, as whatever sense of fulfillment that it gives you, whatever sense of, friendships that you might be creating off of that, whatever sense of, like, profits that you get from it, or benefits you get from it, or just, the sense of, like, superiority that you get from it, all of those things are superficial. It is so superficial. And then think about this: when Trump is gone, then what do you have? You're going to have some other demagogue come up behind him and try to assume that platform. And that person's going to have to do one up over Trump. And so, what you can expect from anybody that would come in the aftermath, if they're going to be on that same continuum, it's only going to get progressively worse, because these people have been emboldened by Trump that got away with all kinds of terrible things, And do you notice that their, sphere of influence expands, but their, circle of, concern is very limited to just a few people. They only care about certain people, certain types of people succeeding. And so you're never going to be a part of that, insulated pocket of thriving that they are creating for themselves. you'll only get substandard, you know, outcomes, and they're going to convince you that that's what you wanted all along. Nothing of what they offered is a life worth living, you know? And change is hard. I know what I'm doing is hard because, you know, if you just look at what Trump's doing, like, he's doing like the bad humanity that already existed and festered in the, you know, underbelly of society. He just brought it to the surface and publicized it. Like, bad actors with nefarious intent have always existed, and they have been running the show in society, and this is why things have not gotten better for everybody on the whole, because these selfish people, you know, what I call the deviant echelon of society, have been working their systems in order to rig everything in their favor. Trump has just brought it all to the surface, and now it's publicized, you know? So he's not doing anything different, honestly. He's doing it more extreme, and it's getting, you know, more and more out of control as he's able to wield his power to, you know, influence outcomes into the favor of, you know, what their idea is of, like, this is where we need to take the world because it's going to lead it in a direction that helps us to continue to succeed how we need to. But what I'm offering, never been done before. It's never even been tried. I mean, there have been many brilliant minds that have influenced my work, that have offered the suggestion of how we might be able to transform civilization to be best suited to actually work for everyone. But even with everything that they have suggested and offered, it's never been in such a way where it really could be a welcome situation that everyone could thrive on, and that people would be compelled through spontaneous cooperation to want to involve with. And then never in such a way to the implementation, by which I see this being like, you know, small stones of positive innovations just put in, you know, places strategically throughout the nation, and just let them create these massive, big ripple effects that go out and improve situations dramatically. And then just, you know, replicate themselves more and more, so you get more and more impacts to the point where it just washes out all of the negativity and replaces it with these positive things. Like, but this is hard. Change is hard because people they don't want to let go of something that they know. Even though it's bad, they don't want to let go of what they know, because, you know, there's so much uncertainty to things that have never been, you know. And so that's why I need to write this book. This is why I need to be able to have, you know, my Twitch channel, to be able to talk to people in real time, let them know it's okay, things are going to be good, guys, you know, and tell people, like, I see the faults in their policies, this is how we can correct for it, there is potential and opportunities to turn this thing around, you know. Because that's going to help to reaffirm for people that there really is potential in this, you know, and it's going to help to ease their minds. And the hardest thing to do is to do something different. But you know what? That was the founding of this nation, was based off us doing things differently. We did something that had never been done before. We put up with crap from some tyrants for a very long time. And we were willing to put up with that crap because it was... to change away from that is so hard. How do we do it? How do we do it? Well, guess what? People started writing articles, and they started, you know, holding public audiences, and they started talking with each other and gathering information and informing policies and saying, you know, we can do this different. And we choose to do things differently in these ways. And let's all get together to formalize the how, you know, this can work. And everybody getting involved, that's what made the difference. We founded this country based off of brilliant minds coming together to say, enough is enough. We want something different. I don't care what sort of unknown variables are going to pop up in the conditions of change. I would much rather stake my claim and my, you know, chances of survival in a situation where we're actually working towards something we would want, instead of to continuously be beaten down in a system of tyranny that strips us of our humanity, denies us our liberty, and then limits our opportunities. Nobody wants to live in a circumstance like that. But there's so many people, like, we don't know what to do. How do we how do we get out of this situation? You know, I see brilliant minds. I pay attention to all these brilliant minds that are coming up with, you know, game plans and suggestions and all these other things. And nothing is at the scale of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a paradigm shifting, you know, whole world approach to doing things in such a way that really is about focusing on what matters and putting people at the core of our decision making instead of profits. It's doing the right thing. And doing so in such a way where you can be integrity bound. Like, I have such a hard time with the Democratic Party just failing on every front to just show up with something that is reasonable and sensible and compatible with the reason and the sense of the people of what they're saying. Like, we need something that will save us from this total catastrophe. You know, this chaos, this mayhem, this apocalyptic bullshit that is being imposed upon us. We need something that will just turn the tides away from all that. Give us something. You know, and the best they can come out with is a mockery of imitations of what Trump does, you know? Piecemeal solutions, you know, a lot of like gestures and, you know, talking good game and saying, champion people at rallies and saying we need to be done with all of this stuff because it's bad. It's like, guess what? Everybody knows it's bad, you know? And we don't need to just hear you stand behind a podium and say, you know, oligarchy bad, society that works for everybody good, and then everybody cheer and clap about it. That's great. I'm glad that everybody's able to, you know, be in agreement in that moment. But that doesn't put everybody on the same page of actionable, memorable, useful things that we can do. Like, that's what we need, and that's what this is about, is me being able to create that in such a way that's tangible. A book, something that you can look at, you can flip through and the pages and be like, when I need a reference, what are we going to do in this case? You go to the page and it says, this is what we do in this case. You know, an actual game plan. And it's not a set in stone, you know, forever, you know, live by the accordance of this, you know, without variation or else sort of thing. No. Like, just like the interpretation of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, it was supposed to be evolved in its interpretation befit the times. And that it is supposed to have a sense of, we have laws that ascend for necessity, they have their ascent for necessity, and they have their sunset for antiquateds. And it's going to be that way with everything, but at least we give a framework of reference to say, you know, this is what could be considered reasonable in response based off of our current conditions, circumstances, situation, or historical reference, all of these things. And it's a stepping stone by which we can build off of that, you know, and evolve the understanding of it over time. But at least there'll be a tangibility to say, you know, everybody who can come to it and look at it and say, this is what we're supposed to be working on. And then the best part is that, you know, if I choose to run for president, it could be the platform and be able to say, this is like our contract, guys. This is what I say I'm going to do, and this is what you should be able to hold me to account for to be able to do. But also understand it's going to take a lot of work on your behalf as well, because, you know, I'm one person. I can't, but we can get this thing to come together, you know, and I will invest everything that I have and bring forth my human ingenuity and all my capabilities to make sure that this works. I pledge my life in my sacred honor to help to accomplish this, you know, and I'm willing to be duty bound to that and to take it on as if it's a contract between myself and the American people to accomplish these things. But at the very least, it's going to give people a vision of what's possible if we are just willing to move beyond what we're forced to comply with, you know, that isn't really working for everybody. The POTUS 47 regime is letting so many people down. It is tearing families apart. It is hurting people. It's causing unnecessary deaths. It's causing, loss of community and culture and businesses. It's causing a loss of our sense of unity with our nation. And it's just a spectacle of like the worst humanity being played out every single day. And there's no hope in that. There's no promise in that. What do you have to look forward to? When you wake up every day, do you wake up with a sense of excitement that I'm so glad that we live in a nation that is working things out to make sure that our nation becomes, a prosperous and, prestigious and good nation? Like, do you wake up with the excitement thinking that, something's going to happen today at the national level, at the state level, the local level, that's going to improve your life? Can you wake up with, can you lay your head down with confidence every night that you'll be able to wake into a new day that is full of potential and opportunities to help you to trust our government more, to trust in our institutions more, to compel you to want to be a participant and contribute to the success of your nation, because it is your success too. Do you have confidence? Can you confidently say that's what's happening under the POTUS 47 regime? No. And if you answer yes to that, I think that you need to do some serious soul searching, because I think that your response is a knee-jerk response. It's the one that you have been, programmed and conditioned to say, because you have to fall in line with what the president says, right? You got to do his will and his bidding. You got to be in agreement with everything he says. He can never be wrong. And you can't dissent against him, because that puts you on the wrong side, of history, and he will use his force against you. And that's a terrifying place to be. So it's much better just to be in agreement with all these bad things that he's doing. Is it really, if you had a choice today to say that you would choose the America that's being made great by POTUS 47's administration's standards, or would you rather wake up into America that is making America work for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind and everybody lives the good life? Which of those two do you think you would be able to wake up into with a sense of excitement and promise and hope, and in a sense of like, I want to be involved, I want to, I can't wait to get out there and face the day? Which one inspires you more? Which one is more exciting? Which one offers more reward? Which one gives you more sense of security, With that, I'm grateful for your valuable time, attention, and consideration of all things, and I hope to see you soon when I start creating my new content, and ask for your support so that I can continue to do my good work and advance my vision forward. With that, again, I appreciate you. Until next time, be well.